Next story has been suppressed.
Advanced philosophy memes. We make good memes. Advanced philosophy memes. Based fucking memes. Advanced philosophy memes. We make good memes. Advanced philosophy memes. Based fucking memes. Shoutouts to Andreas, Deacon, my boy Scott, Pedro, and everyone else that engages on my posts. And Sarah, keep it up, man. You'll get there someday. And everyone else for the great memes.
All right. What's up, everybody? This is Chris from the Terrorist Podcast, and I am currently subbing for Andreas, who is away at the Back to the Future musical, which for some reason happens to be on 9/11. I don't know, make of that what you will, but I'm here with Kurt today, American Time Machine. And first and foremost, I just want to say thank you so much for showing up, man. I mean, I said I just needed one person. If one person shows up, I know I could chew the fat for like a few hours at least. Like, we could do this.
We're at an advantage. We can be as unhinged as we want to be today. That's
Well, honestly, to be fair, like if you ever did see my podcast, like this is more my style. Like I really am more of like the one-on-one type chatting kind of guy. And in fact, like I guess it's going to be a little bit of a challenge to kind of like incorporate, I guess, the viewers' comments and stuff like when I'm supposed to. But yeah, I'm glad to have you. I'm glad to be here. I'm grateful for everyone watching. Thanks, guys. And yeah, let's chop it up. Well, first I want to ask, how are you doing, Kurt? How's your state? How's your physical state? Let's start there. How's your body doing? Is the old ticker running optimally?
more or less, yeah. If I just cut out one bad habit out of my diet, I'll be good. I'm in good shape.
Okay, yeah. I'd say that's a positive. What about your mentality? How's your mental state? Like, do you have any concerns, like any thoughts that are just not serving you? Like any thoughts that are kind of weighing on you or affecting your energy, affecting you energetically?
Oh, we're kind of pointed here. I don't know. Everything affects everything. So I don't know. I've been trying to make my art as good as possible.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, I don't know. There's always concerns that are in your brain, I guess.
Of course, yeah. Like material concerns, like I gotta eat, like what am I gonna eat tonight, and all that jazz.
And I don't know. It's sometimes it's like if you dive into your art too hard, it's like you need to like come away from it to recognize whether it's good or not. So if you like marathon something and try to sit down for like 20 hours and say, okay, I'm tuning everything else out, sometimes it comes out crap. That's just, at least for me, so it's like it's better if I just work on it a little bit and then come back to it later, and then I recognize like, oh, this is what don't know what I was thinking at that time.
Oh, well, we're talking about music, right?
Mostly music. Yeah, I do
Yeah.
a bit of. Well, actually, when I write, I don't even think that. Whatever I'm feeling in the moment, if I write physical letters or like, books. Yeah, if I'm writing a book, which I haven't written very much, but like probably like 50,000 words. But it's just like boom, here's the poop. It's on the page.
Well, the thing about music, and this is particularly like what I'm jealous of Andreas for. Like this is what he does. In contrary to what I do, for example, I guess if I'm listening to the same track that I'm working on over and over and over again, especially the same part over and over and over again, eventually I'm gonna start like, it's like I get that ear fatigue, you know? It's like my tricks my brain into thinking like what I'm hearing is good, but meanwhile, like objectively, what I'm actually hearing is probably shit. If I just listen to it with a fresh set of ears after like a good night of sleep, and that's like it's really funny how that works out. So I end up wasting a lot of time working like, you know how they, you know that quote, like you could polish a turd as long as you want, but at the end of the day, it's still going to be a turd.
I'm vaguely familiar with that quote. Yes.
Yeah. So, you know, with music, it's especially like draining like that. You know, you could think you got the right mix, and you know, like the next day you'll listen to it. The next morning you'll be like, oh yeah, let's hear what I was working on all night, and you'll be like, wow, this is doo doo. So yeah, that happens. Okay, so you got your art and your music on your mind. That's fair. That's I definitely have that on my mind a lot. What about like well, I guess I should throw that in there. How did the whole political climate of America? I mean, I don't really care about this stuff, but I guess in all fairness, just for like this, for the sake of holistic wellness, like we'll include that. How do you feel about the whole political climate, considering the debate just passed us by and all that?
Yeah, we're in such a weird time period, and I guess that's always true. You can consider any time period weird, but like I I almost feel like voting is like it's become this way of making the plebes feel like they have power when they're powerless. So it's like that's why the establishment and like does the whole rock the vote campaigns and everything, because it like it's effective propaganda that makes people feel like they have power, when in reality it's like even Donald Trump, like he was marketed as like the anti-establishment candidate, and there's a lot of nuance to that. And like I do think in some ways, like he in 2016, like yeah, he was kind of a political outsider specifically, but corporate America loved Donald Trump. That's just like he's a corporatist, and so I get this feeling like sometimes I have that feeling of like, okay, well, even if we're able to vote, should I go out and just be an adult, I guess, whatever that means, but use what power I have and at least try to make an influence on things. And so I do go back and forth. Like I can't just like say like, oh, it's all bullshit, might as well not do anything. Well, I guess my question is, what are the real tools that we have to actually make things better? And the more I think about that, like if anybody knows me, I guess my political beliefs most align with types of anarchy. Yeah, I'm the 13-year-old that loves anarchy, I guess. But no, people get the wrong idea about anarchy, and I think if people aren't intellectually lazy and they actually like get into what anarchy and what society would look like, if we got out of, I guess, the international arms race and got out of the race to build empires and civilization, you could get to an actual intellectual understanding of what anarchy looks like. And people do. Small town America incorporates anarchy to some degree into their daily lives. Like if you do something like trade favors for food, like 100 years ago, you'll get these stories of doctors, you know, giving services for trading a chicken. You know, every time people do something like that, and do something that the government basically can't do anything about, that is a form of anarchy. I hope people realize that. Like actually taking care of your community is anarchy. If you voluntarily choose to take action, that's not communism. That's actually voluntary anarchy. When you actually are choosing to do an adult responsible thing and help out your community, that is anarchy. And so that is the one thing, like, I don't know, you can get frustrated in one sense because you think like you interpret that like, oh, society's immature, like here we go again. But like I don't know, it's just like there's so many ways to interpret things, and I don't think just being angry or just having an emotion, I think dealing with the reality of things is how we move forward. And so that's where I'm at. I guess I try to be in some senses stoic, but stoicism has its flaws. You need to find a way to, I guess, synthesize emotion with your stoicism. Well, yeah, accept reality and say, okay, how do we treat people with humanity and use our human emotions to change it for the better? So yeah, I don't know. I went on a rant there. Really, I think we should just stream our music this whole podcast.
No. We could chop it up like normal people. So no, I mean, I was definitely following what you were saying, and I totally agree on because I feel like, you know, when I observe myself and my own, like what my own beliefs are stacking up to be in terms of like my framework and my principles and how I approach my reality, I'm realizing that, you know, it could be like summed up into like these, I guess, parables or idioms or whatever you want to call it. But one of the things I always say is that you can't control what happens to you. You can only control how you respond. And I tend to like I can't say I've always lived with that in mind, but ever since I did start living as if that were my truth, I've noticed that life has gotten significantly better. And I would hope that kind of aligns with what you're saying, you know, like in terms of, I don't know, I guess different mindsets that are accessible to, like, you know, even average people. I think this is like, you know, one of the things that we could actually strive for, you know, like to understand that if you release this idea of trying to like control the events that happen to you, then maybe you could put more focus on how you responded, and maybe you could respond more proactively, you know. And this might go back to like doing your future self favors, I guess, if you want to put it in a weird esoteric way. So yeah, that's how I feel about the concept of, like, you know, what you were saying basically with anarchy. Like, you know, anarchy isn't just like chaos. Anarchy is really just a state assuming that humanity is capable of self-mastery, which I totally agree with, because I think ultimately self-mastery is the only game that we can all play, and it's the only game that we can all win, no matter who you are. You know, like, I think it's we have access to it. So I hope that resonates with like what your beliefs were in terms of like supporting anarchy as how you define it.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. You could get like this. These are things I think about while I'm working, right? I'm back to, so we might as well just like have this like half story time. There is no like set structure here, and that can be a good thing.
Yeah.
So like I was a tour guide for a year and a half, and a lot of that was really fun, but now I'm just going to spill all the beans because like I feel like I've distanced myself from that place. It was a for-profit tourism company, and like I really think things got especially greedy after a certain amount of time. Like it's one of those classic cases where like the owners are like, can we make it 30% margin and have our workers be all right, or can we have it 50 and make their lives absolute crap, absolute horrible for everyone? I think the owner, he's like 5 foot nothing, has little man syndrome, like unironically, like if you're a little man, yeah, if you like, I'm not that tall, I'm not even 6 foot, but like if you're a smaller man, you don't have to let that affect, you know, your mental state or like your sense of purpose,
security,
whatever,
self-esteem.
Yeah. Some people do let it get to them, and well, he's also a military vet. I think that plays into it. I think a lot of military vets have a lot of unchecked trauma. It's unfortunate, and that's also why, you know, we have to have compassion for a lot of vets, I guess, in some way. But anyway, so I did that for a year and a half, and I think a lot of egos came into play. I was really good at my job, just because it's, well, when you get practice talking to people, even like, I guess podcasting is an example. Like, this isn't as interactive, but like if I'm on a tour, I can like ask people like, oh, where are you from? You know, you can take like a 1 hour interest in people's lives, and it like completely transforms the experience. It's really
like a barber.
Yeah, that basically like that. So yeah, I really do think I was good. And well, one of the reasons I was good is because, well, sometimes if you're an older person, like in the tour guide framework, it's like people have bond to you a little bit more quickly. I guess it's just your mindset. You're just like halfway bored. You're like, I've kind of seen some things at this point in my life. So those things help out a lot. Where was I going with that? Oh, yeah. So but yeah, I think egos got involved, and so I was let go. I think specifically part of the reason was because I was good, and yeah, it's weird because
The gift of gab was intimidating to them.
Uh, kind of. I really think that did play into it. Like they really, a lot of things changed. It's like they really started making people do things not associated with the original job. Like I've seen this process though, like in a lot of jobs where, like in the corporate world specifically, when I worked at Domino's, I worked at Domino's for like a year.
Yum.
What a bunch of bullshit. The owner, the franchisee of that franchise, he didn't even live in the same state. We live in Pennsylvania. His style of management was essentially just like bitching at people on the app GroupMe instead, and like never actually showing up to the store. And I don't think the corporate structure is made to defer responsibility of people that should be bearing the responsibility in exchange for acquiring that capital. And so, but we do have the system where the people are acquiring the capital and not actually putting in the work to, deserve it. So it's kind of really fucked up. I'm not saying when I say these things, it's not like, okay, every business owner is a douchebag. No, we have a system that encourages people to transform into a douchebag once they actually own things. And so if you go through that process and you're not a douchebag, good on you. I want to work for you. But it's like that seems to be increasingly far and
Impossible. Yeah, because the truth is like money. I mean, all right, let's break down what money actually is. I mean, in terms of like, it's not just pieces of paper. It's not just a number on a screen. What it's really supposed to be is a store of value. So like, a very crude analogy would be like money is basically like your metaphysical fat. It's your energetic fat. It's your proof of work, in a sense. So knowing that and just knowing the way the US dollar functions, it's almost like if money is a store of it's just a form of like storing energy. We have an energetic diabetes, right? Because basically at the rate of the way like inflation is rising, it's like we would have to, for us to preserve our current buying power, every single year we need like a 15% raise. Like, I mean, I'm not saying it's always been like this, but since like I'd say the start of COVID, that's when you really saw prices start to like really fluctuate. And then you're just sitting there like you're looking at everything, and then you're like, the only way for me to be able to afford everything is if I go to my boss like every year and ask for a 50% raise. And I think like that's a multi-headed problem, but one of the biggest things is like, for example, the US dollar isn't really backed by anything tangible, right? That's like the obvious one. It's supposedly backed by oil, the petrodollar, but what it's really backed by is the promise or the ability of paying off debt from like the smallest scale to the biggest scale. That's how like our credit system essentially runs, which is like what we're all using to like live pretty much at this point. So that being said, right, that's one thing. And also the fact that the Federal Reserve literally has the ability to print money like indiscriminately. I mean, maybe not like literally, like they can't just be like, oh yeah, turn on the money printer, but essentially like they have a little more control than they ought to. I mean, and then there's like a whole host of like subset problems like bank cartels and all that shit. But basically what it boils down to is like the money itself is toxic. It's like we are in a state of economic energetic diabetes. And there's like a few theories, like a few different suggestions to remedy that. I mean, I don't necessarily have to name them. I'm sure that like they'll just come up on the forefront of your mind, like if you really think about it. But yeah, I think that's one of the reasons what you were saying before, how like, if you're a business owner, eventually you're driven to be a douchebag. And I'm just saying like, why? Like, why is it that true across like any industry you look at, like in the system of capitalism? Is it just because it's quote unquote capitalism? It's like, no, I really think it's because our dollar, our US money, it's just broken. It's our system of currency is not working. So, I mean, I'm not an expert on these things. This is kind of just speculation from a douchebag, like from an asshole, but that's just me. Yeah.
All right, so knowledge often in today's world, a lot of knowledge is just there for people who choose to go and find it. And so like it's like, yeah, I do feel like I'm pretty well versed on a lot of like economic scenarios. Like, well, and I think part of the issue is just because we've encouraged people in bad ways to say like, oh, like stay out of your area of expertise. Well, if you start asking certain questions and you start, if you can just answer certain questions, like, our money system is called fiat. So fiat essentially means it's no banking. It just comes out of, a lot of money creation is done through bonds, for example, but a lot of these bonds are essentially just issued directly to a lot of corporations. And so those bonds essentially come from nothing. And so that money is supposed to be something that gets paid back, but sometimes loans are basically extended, indefinitely. Like, pay it back when you feel like it. But some people do default in their bonds, but there's almost a perpetual process of bond creation that constantly, just shoves money into the economy. And so that's essentially how money gets created. If they're raising the total output of currency by like 10% a year, that is the real inflation mark. It's not what that means. A lot of wealth is getting transferred to somebody. Most often in the past 40 years, it's been transferred to we'll say the owner class. I don't think that's propaganda. I think it's like, at this point, like, we do have an owner class, and it's very hard. Well, in some ways, like, I did read some stats about the owner of the wealthy class. I think it can be dangerous to try to justify the wealthy class by saying, well, that money changes hands a lot, and so therefore, it's like it's deserved. If it changes hands often, the 1% changes, who's actually occupying it pretty often. I think that's dangerous territory to actually think that way. It's like, well, what if there were only, one super mega ultra rich lottery winner every year, and it's like, would it justify it if there was just a new lottery winner every year? Not really. I think the system is built to suck people in and churn them out. Like with CEOs, a lot of the CEOs, their lives are basically very tightly controlled. And so I think in some cases, CEOs, they have very rich, lavish lives, but they actually do get burnt out by their roles and expectations. And so I think the strategy for a lot of people that have those opportunities to be CEOs, they might do a couple runs of being a CEO, get fired or whatever, and be like, all right, here's my paycheck, and then actually feel like they can live their lives. I don't know, but I think there's a lot of insight to be had about that. But we're talking about fiat and talking about how much the owner class exerts its power over the rest of society. I think it is concerning, and there's so much material out there. Like, Capitalist Realism was a book I picked up this year. It's gotten a lot of steam, and I think there's a lot of important messages. I think the most important message, in light of all the resources that we have available about what the problems of capitalism are and how what we need to do to address them. Well, I think the only thing we need to decide upon is, like, well, if we're going to do surgery on this thing, what's our plan on the other side of it? And so, to get in this binary thinking, there's a bunch of propagandist thinking, like, oh, you're criticizing capitalism. What have you look at what communism has done? It's like, who the fuck is talking about communism? We didn't even bring it up. Why are you bringing up an alternative system when we're trying to say, how do we fix these problems? You don't need to even call it capitalism. Here are problems. How do we fix these problems? And I don't know. It drives me crazy how it's like people are really brain dead when it comes to this ritualistic worship of something that we call capitalism. And it's like, how brain dead is this process of just, spitting out resources? How much is that actually ensuring our survival and our wellness, our passion, and our humanity? All of those things. Am I a commie propagandist because I just think, how do we think about what's best for us as a species? So I think some people are wired to think, oh, commie propaganda. How is that commie propaganda if I'm trying to think, okay, survival? I think that's literally where we at. Like, that's how deep that's how deep people are entrenched in, like, that is literally the matrix. Like when you can't think outside of these boundaries of what is acceptable thought, or how do we move forward, how do we go into the future.
Okay,
And
but the question is why? Like, what is the biggest factor that keeps us bound to those limiting thoughts, beliefs, and ideas, and that don't really serve us? And yet, we lock ourselves into them. We devote our energy into these habits of consumption and labor for the sake of making another person really, really rich. Like, why? Like, what's the thing that keeps us locked in? I have a theory. My personal belief is it's artificial scarcity, like artificially enforced feelings of scare or a framework of scarcity upon like just the masses. If you make everyone think, like, even if their material needs are met, if you could make them believe they don't have enough of something, whether it's love, whether it's products, whether it's fucking clothes, whether it's status, money, whether it's like cars, followers on social media, if you put people in the state or feeling of lack, well, you know what? They, first of all, they make better consumers that way. Second of all, it reinforces the matrix. It reinforces the system. And I think I was just saying this before. I think the machine or the lube of the machine, the grease, the oil that allows or that the machine to function, it's fear. It's scarcity. It's ultimately at the root fear of death, the fear of not having enough to avoid death. You know, like I think any type of framework that's imposed upon you, like media, for example, like any form of media that's kind of reinforcing this idea of longing, of not having enough, of wanting more, of missing out, like that's probably, you know, not really also depending on how potent it is. I mean, it's really just a pattern. It's not, I'm not saying trying to make it like a nefarious force, but I really do think it's like just one like channel on our frequency radio brain, you know, and it's like really trying to keep us into one channel when it's really about teaching people how to like turn the knob just a little bit, just enough to like experience a better reality. And I was arguing about this before. I was like, I really think gratitude is like a beautiful little brain hack. You know, it's a little shortcut. It's like a way to like turn the knob, so to speak. Like if you actively practice gratitude when like you feel like shit about your life, like no matter what, like you could be a millionaire and feel like shit. You could be a poor person and still feel like shit. But I swear to God, like if you just find something simple, like a cigarette, a cookie, a nice warm glass of tea, like if you could just find a stupid thing to just be thankful for, whether consciously in your mind or just out loud say thank you, I'm thankful for this, like your shit really does magically get better. You know, like I can't explain it. I don't know the science behind it. I don't know the logic, or maybe it's psychology, maybe it's some weird spooky action at a distance. I don't know. I don't know, but I do know that personally, I know that like when my life seemed really shitty, I had to like really take account of what I appreciate in my life for me to take advantage of it and to make my life less shitty. So that's one, and I don't even, that's the only thing either. You know, I think there's different ways to like tune that frequency from the feelings of lack. And I don't know how to do that forever. You can't force that on people, right? You can't just force people to be grateful for what they have. You can't force people to adopt the frequency of gratitude and appreciation and self-responsibility. Like that, the only way to do that, in my opinion, is to embody it yourself, to live that way, and to gain the blessings of adopting that pattern in your life, right? There's nothing else you could do. I don't know what I'm sorry, like I'm that defeated. I'm so defeated with like life and the world in general and politics. Like I'm so defeated where I've literally retreated to self-mastery. That's all I could commit to at this point that I can be sure of. And I'm not saying I have to be sure of something, but it just stirs my soul, you know, just the idea of like, well, I can't control other people. I can't control what happens to me. I can't control events. I can't control things. All I could do is control how I respond to things. And if everyone thought like that, maybe the world would be a way better place. And like, I can't force people to think like that. All I could do is think like that myself, live that way. And if people are seeking, you know, they're like, yo, you seem like you have your shit together. Can you give me some advice with my fucking fucked up life? And I'll be like, yeah, it's no big secret, you know, like I think you should align yourself in mind, body, and soul. And I always say that, but it's true. Like you got to like eventually confront that deepest aspect if your life is really shit. You know, like you got to take stock of what you actually have, and you'll never be able to use it right unless like you learn to be thankful for it. And that's my gratitude rant, you know?
Yeah. In that vein, uh yeah, we're in agreement. And yeah, we're talking about fear, and yeah, fear, it overlaps with samsara. and stuff.
Yeah.
Like one thing, like when it comes with like gratitude, I think gratitude is something that is not an encouraged trait in middle management or management in general.
First of all, because if you encourage gratitude, you make people shitty customers. Like honestly, like the content, first of all, on a psychological level, the content person is the most difficult to seduce. Like you cannot seduce a content person. That's what makes them dangerous to capitalism. I'm serious.
Well, exactly. So like the more I started working at the job, the more, if I would go into work and my instead of, one thing I started doing, and I felt like this was part of my alignment, if the boss asked me to do something, I would just be like, okay, and I would do it. And it seemed like they kept asking me to do more and more things, which I was just at the point where I was like, okay, like it's going to be at a pace. I can only do one thing at a time, but I'm going to do whatever you ask of me. And it was like, but I wasn't absorbing like the stressed energy. That was that's what increasingly it seemed like it pissed them off, because I wasn't like absorbing that just like negative chaotic energy. And so it seems like if you go into any sort of like entry level position at a for-profit institution and you just have that, if you're like,
I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, well, if you're happy to be there, in the sense of not like a yes man type of sense, where you're just like, oh, one with everything. All right, yeah, I'll do this. It's all good. You cannot be content. The attitude is that you cannot be content and productive. So if you go into work and you're productive and you're content, they're gonna be like, this guy's a fucking weirdo. Like I guarantee anybody that does that, they want you in the mindset of like you are literally in the Hunger Games. Like, oh please, can I please have my job? I need this so much. And I was like, fuck this. I'm not gonna fucking do that. That's gay, you know? Yeah. Yeah, if anybody has a problem with me using the word gay, it's just like, gay is great, but gay's just like different. I think the problem is like the people in management that act gay but lie about the fact that they're being gay. You're like, you can be gay, just don't lie about it. And management is lying about being gay. Sorry, that's just my rant. I think the world is backwards on what we can use as acceptable language. I'm just saying, a lot of these media sites are totally ass backwards.
Oh no, don't. I'm not one to like try to like sanitize other people's language. That's not my job.
Remember Wanda Sykes? She had that commercial where it was like, "Don't say gay, stop it."
Yeah.
No,
honestly. No, what were you saying? Continue.
No, in hindsight, that was like one of the funniest commercials. I think people like they pulled that commercial really, really fast, and I think it's because it had like the opposite effect. Of
you were part of like the silver age. You know, if the different generations were like comic book generations, you were like the Gen Xers were like the silver age. You know, and like it got worse after that. But anyway, like that's when like Mad TV was a thing, right? And like it had some really messed up like parody commercials. I would watch that stuff and I would be like, damn, just like, because I think 90s comedy was very nihilistic, you know. So it was it's basically like you could say
can't watch Seinfeld. I just can't. It's like, because Jerry isn't funny, but I mean Larry David is great, but it's just like I can't watch the show.
Yeah,
sorry.
Back then, it's like it was like you could say whatever you want, but it was like screaming into the void. You know, nowadays it's almost like comedians prefer it now that it's more incendiary. You know, like now that there's more high stakes. You know, and I think that's like more fun to them. Because like back in the 90s, it must have been very depressing just to be like, oh yeah, I could just say slurs on stage and no one's gonna care because it's just normalized.
Oh, that was peak George Carlin in the 90s. But now. At this stage, well, like I seen there was the roast of Tom Brady, and someone tried to claim that, oh, the roast of Tom Brady is proof that cancel culture is over. Literally, in the roast of Tom Brady goes up on stage and tells Jeff Ross, "Hey, you can't say that." Like, really? It's like you might be able to get away with other different words. That doesn't mean cancel culture is over. That's an example of like all this media is very, very tightly controlled. So they might not control as much the words the specific singular words that people are saying, but they're definitely controlling the content. So yeah, you can't joke about Tom Brady getting naked in front of Robert Kraft. So,
All right.
it's not a roast if you're not actually roasting people. So that's lame.
All right. So I just want to say,
Tom Brady.
I just want to say for the record that we're about like a little more than a half hour in, and we covered your physical state, your mental state. You know, we discussed your thoughts. Now let's get into your emotional state. How would you describe your current emotional state? Like, how do you feel?
I'm happy to be here and talking.
Yeah, yeah. This is what I wanted to encourage. Just you know, the feeling of like the frequency, tuning the frequency, the collective frequency to gratitude. I'm not even you know, that's the thing. Like I
can't shout this much when there's 10 people here. It's
yeah.
just like it's so much better.
I mean, I don't consider myself like a devoutly spiritual or religious person. It's just I had like, you know, some experiences in life that kind of awakened my senses to certain things and like certain natures of layers of reality that I may not dimensions I may not have necessarily been conscious of. But I do believe that, you know, if you maintain a state of gratitude, and I'm not gonna force that on people, but if you do that, you know, by your own will, I do think like it helps the world. So that's why I try to do it, you know, just in an objective state. Like I'm being completely pragmatic here. You know, I think it's so corny, actually. I think gratitude is so corny and cheesy, and love is so corny and cheesy. But if that's the way to like, you know, making things better, then I fuck it. I submit, you know, like I'll submit to gratitude, the frequency of gratitude and love. Like I'll do it for the greater good. No matter how cheesy my ego says it is, like I'm cool with it. I'll do it. Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't mean for all of this, like, I might have been slightly intense, but I didn't mean it as like angry or hatred towards people. I don't like, I've had moments in my past where I've had to address my own hatred towards like generally rich people, because I've interacted with them and sometimes like, wow, this person's being like really shit right now. But like the next level is like, I've also like observed their patterns of behavior over a period of time. And it's like people that do bad things, people that do bad and crappy things, they may not always consciously acknowledge it, but I think, you know, we have something thankfully built into our brains that subconsciously like gets weighed down with every, you know, negative karmic thing that we do. And it's like on a subconscious level, it's like these people that are in positions of power, they repeatedly do things to punish themselves. And like when they lash out at other people, when you lash out at other people in a way, you are also lashing out at yourself. This is something that, you know, we've talked about, is like people are extensions of your own consciousness. And if you are abusing them, that means, you know, that's something that's going to, you know, suck its way back into your own life. These people are literally going to hell, and you shouldn't want them to go to hell. It's like they are building their own version of hell and constantly going there. And so,
oh snap, we got Andreas.
Shh.
Hey,
Andreas.
I wish.
Yeah, we could see you. We could hear
Oh my
you.
god,
Cool.
I'm at the Back to the Future musical right now, and they're doing a shit. Oh, it's starting again. All right, I'll see you guys later.
No.
Love you guys.
Damn, he left us. Nah, he's still here. Maybe? Nah, I don't know. Seems to have frozen.
We'll just have his face there forever.
Yeah.
But, yeah. But once you're, I think the world makes a lot of sense if you voluntarily try to put yourself in a position of compassion. So, like, I do think, you know, in a way, I've tried to apply this to, you know, the theory of like atomization, the atomization of people. And, you know, we're really far spread out. It's like we're spread out from the tribe. And like taking position of compassion, well, it does transform my way of thinking about things. So like we can either hate a bunch of teenagers, you know, for being constantly wired to their phone, or adults and looking at it and be attached to it. But like when I looked at it through the lens of compassion, it's like, well, what are we missing? If atomization is hurting people's sense of connectiveness, what is the natural result? What's going to happen? I think people are going to do things to try to feel like they are reconnected. So if you're not having essentially the reality of culture pass right before your eyes in terms of it being all around you with people, if you have a phone that gives you that portal into that culture to try to feel constantly connected, like, people are going to get addicted. That's just what's going to happen. And so I don't think it's not, if you're just taking the approach that phone technology bad and you just remove it out of people's lives. Well, if we're still in this system that prioritizes resources over people, like, you're going to still have the mental health disorders, and all you did was just take the technology away. It's like the technology is really just a reflection of how entrenched a lot of entrenched the processes is becoming in people's lives. So I don't think part of mental health would be just removing the technology and removing the stimulus. Addressing the mental health aspect is somehow reconnecting people to the tribe. And so I think humanity tried to build up civilization, and empires tried to build up because we did think that was good for our survival. And perhaps we thought, if we make each person spread out and as strong as possible, we're hedged against the enemy. But multiple societies have done that. And the more that has happened, I think that the more we disconnected people from, themselves and culture in a way.
All right.
So
I have a theory on this. Like, I mean, because first we started with like what all the kids were doing, which is like staring at their phones, and depending on like how we perceive it as positives and negatives. Like, I mean, this is what I believe in terms of first that basic outcome. I do think phones are great. The internet is great. And I think, like, in fact, it's so good, right? I think for all that is good, it's going to manifest something in reality that is just as bad. So think of all the good that the internet and like having cell phones for kids' hands, like think of all the good that does. For all the good it does, I think it does just as much bad. And here's the thing about positive and negative experiences in people's lives. Like, I don't think the problem is like the fact that, people's lives are negative or become negative. I think the truth is, like, if you want to picture it like in a physical sense, like a pendulum, right? It goes from positive to negative, and the only thing you could be sure of is that pendulum will always keep swinging. It'll never, ever, ever, ever stop. It's the problems happen when like people want to keep the pendulum stuck on the positive end or keep the pendulum stuck on the negative end. There's people who go through like traumatic events and they're like, no, that's who I am. That negative experience is a part of me. It's and they want to stay in that memory. So they'll keep it locked into their reality, which will break down their whole system. Same with the positive. That's how you become like a bliss junkie. Maybe you'll end up like becoming a drug addict that way, where you're just going to end up keep chasing positive feelings and whatever. So if the only thing you can be sure of is that you're going to end up going through positive and negative experiences, well, I think this is why people end up praying or meditating, because then it changes the dimension, not just from left to right, but to also up and down. So when you go to the positives, you go down in your grossest matter state, in your material 3D state, so that you could enjoy everything in a physical sense. Then when things get bad, that's when you tap into your higher self and swing upwards, where you meditate or pray and tap into your higher consciousness, as they call it. So it's like, I think that's the kind of like the meta solution, like not really something you could, I guess, like just pill or like medicate away or into people, but you kind of have to just like sort of figure that out, right?
Yeah. I think a real big issue, you could call it like this movement of neo-spiritualism, where you can get trapped.
Is that spiritual? I don't know what to call that. That's just the only best way I could describe it in terms of, because I don't know, I can't speak for all of religion or all of spirituality, but I do know when you do certain practices, you do tap into a state that seems to transcend your material worries, your material concerns and all that stuff. Like you connect more with your something else self, not your brain, not your body. It's more like your spirit, your soul, No,
to paint broad strokes, I think if meditation were a common practice, or things like incorporating, I guess, philosophy into the education system, I think these would just generally be good things. Like, if people did something like at least try to meditate, I think that would give a lot more perspective about where we're at as a society and how we can, get healthy healthier as a people, mentally, physically, spiritually, all those things. So yeah, a lot of agreement there. One thing I find at this point is like, I guess ego can be tricky, and so I don't think you can ever you can the first step is like identifying the ego, and I like right now my theory is like the ego can be seen as basically a child in the corner.
Yeah. Can you
Yeah.
tell us the theory, by the way? Just like going to like a small rant while I use the bathroom. I'll be right back.
Yeah, go ahead. All right, so if you're paying attention here, great to see you all. This is my cat Muffin. She's great. Yeah, theory about ego is that you can identify the ego almost as a separate self, but like I'm reminded of this. I recently watched Breaking Bad. Breaking Bad is such a great show. But we see essentially Hank. I read an article where Hank gets his ego real shot down when he gets crippled, and he really gets into minerals. And so in the article, someone said that was like an example of like ego negation. You can't just negate your ego and expect good effects. Like you can't pretend that you don't have one. You simply need to be good at identifying it. And so you can see the ego as essentially a child that needs to mature and grow up. It might not ever grow up completely. That's the tricky nature about the ego. But essentially, you want to be able to identify it and know when to say, "Hey, take a back seat for a second." While we do something serious. We have to do something that's important and for the good of everyone, not just the good of us. But yeah, you need to get back there. And so like you need a maturation of the ego, so the ego isn't the thing that's driving you and controlling you, but you can't do that just by negation. There's some sort of integration and maturity that has to come in with that. And so I don't know, I think thinking about it that way, I guess I've only really thought about it in the past year. I think I've done a lot of work with identifying the ego. Now I've identified it, and now I'm trying to get past that point where you can get into this like mental space of, oh, I'm so spiritual and so enlightened. Good thing. Look at me. I meditate 4 hours a day, when really it's like you're just getting farther and farther up your own ass. You know what I mean?
Speaking of which, like instead of like pondering further and further, like navel gazing, instead of going further and further into like what it all means and all that, I think what's also really important, and like again, like when I talk about it, I say I think people neglect the physical aspect of like spirituality. I don't think it's about like forsaking the physical form and not caring about the material, your material self. Like it's very much so a physical process, because what you're essentially doing is you're evolving spiritually, so you're taking in more energy. And if your body like isn't up to snuff, it's like it's going to get vaporized. It's like overloading a piece of technology with way too much voltage, and it's just fries. Like I think like when people try to actively engage with too much spiritual energy and they don't have the vessel, like the mental and the physical vessel, to like properly contain it, then they're gonna like short circuit. And this is why, like, I think, going back to like the pendulum analogy, I think the goal isn't to just like avoid the negatives, but really it's to make that swing move faster and faster and faster and faster. And that's really what raising frequency is about. And in order to do that, what you do is you align yourself in mind, body, and spirit, like not to go harder, faster, stronger in any one of those things, but make them harmonious with each other, like music. You make it so your mind, body, and soul are not at war with each other, because that's the biggest problem. It's not that people have a weak mind or a weak body or a weak soul. It's that they have a mind that's attacking their spirit, and the spirit that's attacking their body, and their body that's attacking their mind. And it creates this like vicious negative feedback loop. So if you could align yourself in mind, body, and soul, take care of your body, unlearn your shitty beliefs and ideologies and your thoughts that don't make you feel good, and then treat your emotions not as you, but as visitors that are just passing through you, and stop identifying with your emotions. And like, that's how you like identify more with your soul and your higher self. And if those things work together in harmony, it sounds more like a chord and not just noise, not just like chaotic material, random blob of flesh and meat walking this like rock. Then you become something more aligned, something more attuned to something higher. I mean, I can't say what that higher thing is, but there's a lot of words for it. We both know that, but that's my take on it. It's not so much about like I guess, like trying to avoid anything. I guess it's just really alignment and making things harmonic, flow together.
Oh yeah. One of my favorite quotes, I'm kind of paraphrasing, that I've heard in the past couple of years is that you attract what you hate. You become what you hate. And so like the solution is like to try to get enlightened to the point where you're not hating things. And I think that's a challenge. You can't just like, that doesn't happen overnight, but it's like a muscle that you exercise and it gets better over time. And so sometimes we try to use politics as a lightning rod for
Oh man, yeah, it's like a huge spiritual pitfall, as I would say, like, because I mean, I'm not a spiritual expert, but I don't think it takes an expert to realize how like politics can really reinforce like the us versus them mentality, which just reinforces separation, which reinforces fear, which reinforces like, I don't know, like all sorts of nasty things, like all the worst decisions I've made, like, reflecting retrospectively, I'm like, I made those out of fear, like fear I would miss out on something, fear that I wouldn't have enough popularity for something, or fear I wouldn't have enough like status for something or whatever, like if you could get over that fear, which is, I don't know, like, I mean, there's a few ways to do it. I'm not saying there's one end all be all way, but I think that's like a good prerogative that people should hold.
Yeah. I think anecdotally, it's like, I feel everyone knows maybe an abusive person in their lives. I think the people that are most abusive, it's not any coincidence that they're often the most unhappy, unfulfilled people. It's just because, it's definitely an inflection. I mean, you want to put a stop to that as much as possible.
And I want to go back to what you were saying about like going up your own ass with spiritual, which I get it. It happens a lot. Like I've watched like all sorts of crazy documentaries. Shout out to the Escaping Twin Flames universe on like Amazon. That was a funny one. But yeah, like, you'll get all these like pseudo neo spirituality, new age cults and stuff. And some of them would be like pretty predatory, which I get, I could totally see how that would happen. But what prevented me from going off the rails, honestly, this is why I said before, it's a very physical process. It was like when I was doing martial arts, I think that's really what helped me.
Well, no, you think I could do that? You think I could do it from the back? No way. They're not going to let me do it from the seat, would they? Oh, you're right. I could get away with that. Okay. Hold on, let me just... Okay. Yeah. So, this is it, bro. This is the Back to the Future musical. It's pretty amazing. Some of the problems with it are that they didn't want to offend anybody, so they changed the terrorist attack to being a nuclear incident. But there's some really good, like Biff was clearly the bastard father of McFly references with Star Wars, where he says, "I am your father." And I would give the musical, like, if you're a musical person, it's great. If you're not a musical person, like, even if you look Back to the Future, you might not be into this because it's so Broadway. But it's really good. Yeah.
Yo, it's good to hear from you,
I probably can't hear you very well in here.
It's good to hear from you, man. It's good to hear from you, dude.
Oh, I wanted to say thank you guys for doing the show, because I really love watching the show. Like, I like being a part of it. But on my way home tonight, I'll be able to watch the show, and it's nice and it's reassuring to know that even if I were dead, this would exist. I know that sounds really Slavic, but thank you guys. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Sorry, people that want to walk by.
Love you, bro. Love you. We love you, man.
We're going to restart a 2-hour stream, and it's all going to be our music.
You guys are beautiful. All right. And you gals and everything in between. Establish your pronouns for me later. Take care.
Thank you,
man. Cheers.
Do you have the ability to create a separate stream?
A separate stream?
Yeah, after this one's over.
Maybe. I mean, I think by the time this one's over, Andreas will be like on point and he'll be able to do it.
Well, yeah, we could just restart the stream, and then that could be the one that we hit with all the copyright strikes, because then he could just delete it. But like 100 people get to listen to our music for 2 hours.
Well, here's the thing. Like, the biggest problem, honestly, is that neither me, you, or Andreas like live together or are in proximity to each other in the same city. Because here's my idea. This is what I did with the Terrorist podcast. Like, I did a radio special before, because usually my thing consists of like in-person podcasts where the episodes last for like an hour or an hour and a half long, and we talked. But I did an episode where I would play all of my friends' music. You know, they would send me all their shit, and then I would spend like an hour like playing through songs. And once the song's over, we do. It's just like, you know, listening to the radio in your car. And I was doing this, and I realized this only worked so well because my buddy who I did it with was able to like come over, get on the mic with me, get on the DJ decks, and then we would like cycle through the playlist. And then when the song was over, we just turn down the gain and we would talk on the mic for a bit. So I was saying we could do something like that. It's just not as fun, you know, when like we're not in the same room together, but it could definitely still be done like over wirelessly.
Oh yeah,
you know.
Well, I could share something that I didn't release yet. Yeah, we can do that at some point. That can't be struck down.
Yeah, and also, oh yeah. Before Andreas graced us with his presence, I was just talking about how like oh yeah, what prevents you from going up your own ass with spirituality? Well, for me, it was martial arts practice. Like I could honestly say that, and this is why I say it was a physical practice. Like no matter what, like how metaphysical shit got for me, like I still had to show up to the dojo on Saturdays and like lead classes, and I'm like, okay, I'm still a person, like I'm still me. I still have to like show up to do this thing, and then I would show up to do this thing even though I felt like depersonalized as hell. Like I felt like, what the fuck, like what's the point of it, you know, anything. And I felt good about it, I felt blissful, but anyway, like I felt very depersonalized, but I still had to show up to the damn dojo going through my awakening. So it kind of like kept me grounded, you know, kept me like very locked into like my physical frame and the thing I was doing like more and more of, because it was the thing that triggered it in the first place. So I just kept doing it, and I got like, my body just got like stronger and stronger. And I theorized that makes you a more suitable vessel, I guess, to handle more spiritual energy. So in my mind, it's like I don't do like ancient crazy yogic practices or anything like that, but like I do have this combination of, I guess, like physical wellness, like martial arts, and then I like try to like, I guess, like come up with, you know, come across and learn of other people's ideas that would benefit my life, you know. And yeah, I think like mind, body, and soul alignment is very important to like infinite scales. Like it scales outwards in that, from that core principle. Anyway, what were you saying?
Which part? Refresh my memory.
Okay, I think you were talking about people going up their own ass with spirituality and getting so lost with their shit, and becoming like complete. Yeah, like they stop giving a fuck about like reality, pretty much.
Okay. Okay, I think, well, we're given this reality, and so I think half of our problem is like, so you can create your own world with spirituality, and that can become really distant from, you know, like actual reality. And I think that's almost just as bad as the false reality, you know, the whole matrix that we've created for people in general. You know, it's like we've really distracted people from the concept of death. And so it's not like we should be, you know, happy with people dying. In a sense, we should be, because, you know, death gives, in a way, gives life, you know? And so you have to accept the reality of your own death in order to live your life in a fulfilling way and to actually be kind to yourself. And so it's not like, and that's why, you know, in Buddhist thought, you know, the real reason why suicide would be a sin is because, well, you have to treat yourself as almost as if you're a separate person. You know, you have to think with your consciousness and think that every, you know, cell in your body is something that's trying to live, or at least, you know, live a decent amount of time. And so like if you off yourself, you know, if you do suicide, you're not just hurting yourself, you're hurting a part of the world, you know. That's the way that it's thought of. And so yeah,
well, if you assume that everyone is the same soul living out different lifetimes in different bodies, and there is one source when it comes to like, you know, our spiritual selves,
and it also doesn't end the pain, because you're in this process of rebirth. You just like wake up essentially in a different time and different place, and you have the same pain, more or less. That's in that thought. So sorry, do you want to interrupt me? I can keep going.
No, I could also. I have another question for you. So well, it's not. I'll preface this with like my own thoughts. So like like the difference between a mystic and a schizo. Like I don't mean to use. I don't mean to use it.
Quote it
that
up,
way.
man.
I don't mean to use it if it's that derogatory, but I'm just thinking about how like so schizos and mystics are both general. Like if there's something you could say about both of them that they share in common is you could say they're like smart people, right? They're generally intelligent people, or they're perceived as such in some form or another. And I really think about intelligence, or I guess like the way we understand it, and it's like general intelligence is basically your ability to recognize patterns, or that's like the metric of it. So if you could recognize patterns and you're really good at it, I think that could both end up being like it could end up being really, really good for you or really, really bad for you. So for example, it could be really, really bad for you if you have a knack for pattern recognition, and then you start spotting like patterns everywhere, like all the connections and everything, because the fundamental truth is like everything is actually connected. Everything is pretty much made up of patterns that's connected with each other. But the problem is like, when you're a quote unquote schizoid, like you start focusing on external patterns and you become way too engrossed in it. Whereas the mystic focuses on internal patterns. There's a difference, because the external patterns, yes, you can notice them, but the great illusion is thinking you could do anything to like supersede patterns. No, patterns are actually greater than us. Those are like demons, angels, spirits, gods, whatever you want to call it. They're entities, like patterns themselves are entities. They're probably more conscious than we are, So that being said, if we recognize that our own patterns pretty much like create our reality. And yeah, I mean, I don't mean to rant. I was just basically saying that the more conscious you are of your patterns, like the more the more you'll realize like whether you're subscribed to, say, the positive entities, you want to call them angels, or the negative ones like the demons. So what's your take on that?
The vibrations. I'm thinking, I guess. Yes. Sometimes silence is justified. Yeah, there's that quote about the mystic, the mystic swims in the same waters as the schizo, but the schizo drowns, But well, that made me think of this one. I watched this mental health video when I was in college, and there was like an actual schizophrenic, and he was unmedicated, and he was just talking, and it was actually kind of interesting to watch him talk, because he was like, he was talking about how the sperm like meets the egg, in biology, and then they like gave him medication, and then like he turned into the most boring person on the planet. Like I almost felt kind of bad. I was like, is this what it means to heal people? It just turn them into boring, planks of wood? Because like they were asking him like, so what are you going to do now that you're healed? And he was just like, work.
Okay, so like kind of like,
we broke him, Johnny.
I'm thinking like, like the overlap is like the pattern recognition skills. But when you're focused on external patterns, that's how you become like a conspiracy theory nut job, and you get into like the numbers, like, oh, the number 23, like whatever. Whereas if you're a mystic, you focus more on the internal patterns that are inherent to our own internal processes, like how I'm thinking, how I'm feeling, my behavior, my habits, what I'm eating. And those are all patterns too. And like, how can you hope to master like all those crazy patterns that are like invading you and invading your experience in your life when you don't even master your own internal patterns, your thought patterns, your emotional patterns, your patterns of reactions, your habitual patterns? Like, I mean, if we think that patterns don't rule our lives, like, do we not eat, shit, and sleep? Like, do we not like have to like live through seasons, in life? Like patterns literally run our lives. So if we get caught up on external patterns, I think that's what makes us schizoid. Whereas if we concentrate more on our own internal patterns and seek to master those, because that's the only thing we really can control, right? And that's, I think, is what the mystic understands. So the mystic will never teach you like how to like try to control external patterns, because that's like pointless. However, when you master your own internal patterns, suddenly everything else bends to your will. I mean, that's the truth, right? Because when you master your internal patterns,
that's right where my brain thought was going, because like the mastery of the internal does lead to mastery over the external. And so like I think, we're both of the mindset where like I don't have to like speak in code. Like if I just jump off the wagon and start talking about, like we'll say like the ether, or
Yeah.
the
Mana.
the ethereal realm, or like psychic projection. It's like, yeah, I totally believe in synchronicity, psychic projection, and it's like one of those things where, yeah, there's almost no way to actually do a manual about it and say like, oh, this is where it comes, or this is it's like it's a very passive thing. I do notice the most powerful tool that gives light to this is dreams. And I think I mentioned this last week. Like if you actually start having a dream log and a dream journal, you'll see how your subconscious or unconscious projections of mind lead to changes in your external reality that you cannot possibly have any sort of control over otherwise.
I want to stop you right there. What you just said, dream journaling. Yes, if you do dream journaling, you know this. And I also want to shamelessly promote journaling because I do it as an everyday practice. And I do think it's extremely useful to the point where it's important enough to mention. And every day I journal and I do one page, and my pages consist of 4 parts. It's what's going on, like current events, how my physical state is doing, what my mental state is like what are the thoughts that plague me, like questions that I'm concerned with, and then 4th is my emotional state. And I just write this down. No one ever sees this, so it doesn't even matter. Like there's no reason to lie in it. There's no reason to look like anything. This is all for me. And I think like after doing this for like a year straight, like I realized if you don't do this, you're like flying blind through life. And I didn't realize this until I started doing it. So yeah, I think journaling is a very underrated, underspoken practice. And it changed my fucking life. Like I can't understate this. Like it was insane. Crazy. But anyway, what were you saying?
Yeah, I was that was I guess the point in itself, but to springboard from there, with all these, psychic manifestations, they're everywhere. And it can become tempting to come out of the zone of like self-mastery, I guess. And I'm still not there. I know I'm not there in self-mastery. I just
No one is. It's because it's not a destination, it's a path.
It is a path. I do think, in at least Buddhist thought, I think, the idea is that maybe you can achieve enlightenment in your lifetime, but it is a lifelong process. But like, so it can become tempting to use, that knowledge for selfish reasons, but that totally defeats the purpose. I get the direction I'm trying to go is to say this. So one thing I feel like I figured out a lot more is how, like, if you want to attract certain things in your life, why do you want to attract certain tangible things in your life? Why is the moment that you have in front of you not good enough? So if you can get to the point where you're doing surgery on yourself and being like, oh, this moment's pretty good, if you can work yourself into that mindset, yeah, that's just great for your life. Like what's wrong with that? But I think for a lot of people, like right now, a romantic partner, I think that's a very complex area of life, is when you start talking about romantic partners. But
it's a karmic tie, essentially.
Yeah, there is a karmic tie there. There's also this aspect where, like, if you recognize the psychic connection between all things, you could theoretically use that to manipulate people. But like, if you try to manipulate, for example, a romantic partner in your life, that never works out well unless you've already done the spiritual work on yourself to be happy within your context. And so I guess related to this is like, I struggle with like, sometimes I imagine, what if I just had, $1 million, parts of that would be certainly right. But I think, there is a certain hell that exists on Earth for sure. And I think, you know, the way we've structured our working class, that is a very real and large reality, and aspects of it are indeed hell for a lot of people. And so if you just step out of that and completely ignore it, it's like that's not actually showing compassion for people. So it's like, in a way, it's like, yeah, you don't want to enable the system, but at the same time, you actually have to look under the current and look at the surface and look at what people are experiencing in order to have compassion for them. And so that's why I think, well, that's 105,000% why the owner class doesn't actually change things. They just purposefully distance themselves from the process. If they actually, you know, looked under the current and had to develop compassion for people, things would change very, very quickly. And so, like, that's also a key to the process of change. I think you need to have the ability to recognize the system, not fall victim to it, but also realize that that's how you do show compassion for people, is actually witnessing it to some degree. So yeah, that's a tricky one, I guess. I
have a theoretical framework for what you just said, like kind of like a model, I guess you could call it. So I call it like this, right? So assuming God is real, just as a thought experiment, and God is like infinite love, infinite gratitude, infinite compassion. That's just God is unconditional love. And we know this. And as human beings with the divine spark, because if everything is of God's creation, then we are of God's creation. So therefore, the divine spark is also within us, especially because we could think, and especially because we could even perceive the divine spark and the divine source and all that stuff. So assuming we have that. Now, I like being that we're incarnated human beings, right? I think if we fully adopted or tried to adopt like unconditional frequency, like completely as God, we would just get vaporized. I don't think three-dimensional reality, material reality will allow you to exist as a human trying to embody the infinite mana of source. You know, like you try to do it, you try to become that, and suddenly like some guy just like robs you of your shit, and you're like, oh, okay, I love you unconditionally. You know, some guy comes and stabs you in the kidney, you're like, oh, I love you unconditionally. They stomp your head in and you're like, I love you unconditionally. See, like as a frail human, you cannot like fully embody that, because that's for God, that's not for us humans. However, we can tap into it. We cannot become that unconditional love, but we could like kind of tap into it. And I think that's where virtue comes from. I think that's how we get things like loyalty, sacrifice, discipline. Like, I think that's how we get like service. I think that's how we get that, is we don't fully embody, like try to take in all of that unconditional love within our frail human form. However, we could tap into it. And I think the stronger, like not stronger, I should say, the more aligned you are, the more like aligned in mind, body, and soul you are, the more you could tap into, like the more you could draw in, you know. And it's like, it's a blessing. It's literally receiving blessings, as the Bible would say, or, you know, like receiving supernatural gifts or spiritual gifts, as some other teachings would describe it. But that's kind of like, you know, like my possible framework for it. You know, I'm like, because I cross-referenced it, you know, like in terms of like all the people who gain divine blessings, divine favor, spiritual gifts. You know, it's like, it really does seem like you get these things if you just not worship the right God, not kill the right people or the right like heretics. It's if you align yourself in mind, body, and soul, so your own systems are not at war with each other and working together in harmony, then eventually stuff just starts pouring in. Like whatever cosmic entities and celestial entities are out there, they're all saying like, okay, you know, you're ready for more. And then, you know, it's like, all right. And then you maintain that frequency, you maintain that pattern of harm, inner alignment. And then it just gives you, the universe gives you more, you know. And it's kind of beautiful and poetic in that way. I don't know for sure. Like, I don't know if there's no material way to like say this is the way things are. This is just the way my experience has been. And from what I can tell, it's like been a lot of other people's experiences as well, you know?
For sure. You're gonna have all the cats in your life.
Yeah.
We got a lot of cool cats on the show.
Oh my God, cats are so crazy. Like, cause I mean, like there's so many synchronicities. We don't call them coincidences here. I appreciate that. We call them synchronicities. And I've had synchronicities. Like, you know, earlier in Europa, I was describing how like my spiritual awakening was triggered by like winning a sword tournament, you know, because I was like really down in the dumps. Like I was, you know, my life like got torn apart because I got dumped by like my 3-year-long relationship. I was just living by myself for the first time. So I was in complete solitude, no roommates, no girlfriend, no family, which was actually like pretty nice. And I didn't realize it at the time, but I had to like process my loss, process my like shit. And it really fucked me up. And it got to a point where I saw like, you know, I was still doing martial arts practice because like, what else was I going to do? So in comes this like opportunity to compete in this tournament. And I was like, fuck it. I'm just going to go for it. You know, I was like, I got nothing else going on. So I told all my friends and family, I was like, if I don't get first place in this tournament, I'm going to shave off all my hair. And I told everyone this, and they all held me to it. They like reminded me virtually every day. It's like, remember, if you don't get first place in this tournament, you're going to shave your head, you said. And I was like, yeah. So, dude, I trained hard for this shit. Like I did intermittent fasting. I did like more intense training, like extracurricular training. I did fucking, I like changed everything, you know, like I quit a lot of things. Like I stopped drinking as much, you know, just because I wanted to like not shave my head, you know, and like that kind of like put me in this state where I was like hyper focused on this outcome. And, you know, the tournament day came and I fucking won. It was like, I was just like, I just breezed through the entire competition. I defeated like all the brackets and I came in first place, just like I said I would. And I remember like the real shift like in frequency happened in retrospect was when we were all like lined up waiting to receive our awards and shit. And I got a vision or an image of my ex like having sex with someone. I don't know who the person was. It wasn't specified, but just this image or this like thought. And I was like, no, I just denied it. I just like said absolutely not. You know, like I don't know who said no. And I don't know who put that thought there or who presented that thought in that moment when I was like on top of the world. And something in me, and it wasn't my head, it wasn't my thoughts, it was my guts or something, my heart. And it just said, no, absolutely not. And I stayed in that moment, and I stayed in that moment of victory. And then like I received my like first place medal, and everything worked out exactly like the way I could have ever wanted it to. And then that night, even I was like, am I going to wake up as like the same shitty Chris, like the same unsure, not this confident Chris? Like, am I going to go back to that same shitty reality, that same shitty frequency of lack? And I woke up the next morning, it was like, nope. And I still felt on top of the world. And then a few days after that, David Grush came before Congress, started talking about aliens, and I fell down some pretty fucking serious rabbit holes. It got to like the point of all like the Satanist Masonic worshipers who deal with all the child sex trafficking and all that shit. I'm sorry if that was like if that's not kosher for the stream, but that's what I fell into. And like I got like so scared where it led me to the solution. It's like, what's the solution? How do we fix this? And everywhere I looked, it was like, raise your consciousness, raise your consciousness, raise your I'm like, what the fuck does that mean? So I Googled it. I was like, what does it mean to raise your consciousness? And then I read it, and it just triggered something in my head when I heard things like, you are a focal point of the universe experiencing itself. And I was like, what? And then suddenly, like, I felt really like I came across like it was like a set of dominoes falling. You know, I was like, wait a minute, soul. You know, I realized instantly, like, oh yeah, souls are real. We all have souls. And then it's like, what is a soul? Oh yeah, it's energy. Energy can't be destroyed, right? So why would a soul be able to be destroyed? And it's like, and then there was the whole blockage of like, does our consciousness, does our knowledge go on? And it's like, yeah, I do think it does. I mean, do you have cases of like near-death experiences where people were brain dead and, you know, they went into the afterlife and they came back, they remembered some stuff? Or you have people who got like pieces of their brain surgically removed and somehow it made them like more intuitive, maybe not smarter mechanically, but it made them more intuitive. Like they were able to maybe read intentions better, you know, maybe it made them more psychic. So yeah, this is kind of the gist of like how I think like it's like this weird awakening process, I guess, right?
Yeah, there could be maybe with your brain. Won't go too down with this idea because I don't like, you know, there could be like a sort of fogginess that gets removed. Like if you get a chunk of your brain missing, like all of a sudden, you know, like the receptors that are good at doing other things, you know, those are the ones that are like, now's my chance. And so like you might have superpowers after that. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, it did feel like superpowers because for me, like I wrote, you know, that's when I started like journaling, like not, you know, I started like a commonplace notebook and all that stuff. Like writing not like writing as in like trying to write articles or blog, like just writing for my own sake, like writing stuff down in notebooks for myself, like a commonplace notebook or journaling. Like once I started making that a regular practice, that like I would start writing stuff down and I would look at it. I was like, what the fuck did I write? And it's like, for some reasons, like some of the stuff would be like, I'm going to trust life. I'm going to trust life as a highly intelligent force that knows exactly what it's doing to us and gives us exactly what it means to, exactly when it means to. And like, I would just write this stuff down like purely intuitively. And I would be like, this is a little weird, but it made me feel good. It didn't make me feel scared. It didn't make me feel like it was unnatural or alien. This made me feel like it was like hidden truths within me. And I was like, I am the universe. Like life isn't happening to me. Life isn't happening for me. Life is not happening through me. I am life. I am a focal point of the universe experiencing itself. And that's what we all are in a sense, you know, like once that truth hits, once you understand that, you don't have to be scared of demons or aliens or Satanists or cults, because even the demons have that divine spark in them. Even the demons have God in them. Even like everything has, you know, there's only one source. There's the absolute. Okay, so after that, I should also mention my my rabbit like deep dive into Hermeticism. I shout out to the Kabbalion. Like that put a lot of things into perspective for me because I like the way it was like very simple. I think it's a really good handbook to kind of handle like metaphysical perspective of Earth and reality and the universe as we know it, you know, like because most people like are under this assumption that the universe happens to them, that they are nothing more, that their reality, they are a product of their reality, when the truth could possibly be, and more evidence is suggesting that reality could be more downstream from consciousness. And that would mean that our thoughts are indeed a form of energy, and they could be more fundamental than atoms, you know, our thoughts. And it's not just our thoughts. I think it's also emotions, and it's also our physical state, because we are like incarnated humans, right? We do have to have a physical vessel to be able to project this kind of manifestation principle upon three-dimensional reality. So, I mean, and the fucked up part is like, I'm a high school dropout. You know, like I'll be real with you. I'm not a person who's like well versed or well educated in theology or physics, you know, like, or theoretical physics. Like I'm not any of that. You know, it's just for some reason it's like real intelligence, pattern recognition is not hindered by genetics. It's hindered by your negative frequencies. It's hindered by these beliefs about yourself. It's hindered by negative relationships that you constantly like preserve and reinforce because you think you need it. Like you think you'll be at a loss without it. You know, you are your own worst enemy in terms of being able to see with like clarity, you know, in terms of pattern recognition, because remember, everything is patterns. Our whole reality is built up of patterns. So yeah, I think yeah, it's really not about like, you know, how smart you have to be. And that's the beauty of it, because like you could have all the brain power in the world, but if you don't have enough faith to engage with this holy, like not just to like read the texts, but to like actually put your body on the line. You know, that's what I did. You know, like in the last week's episode, I talked about how I did like the 30-day semen retention challenge just as an experiment. I was like, I want to try this shit. I want to see if it's, because intuitively I knew there was something to it. You know, just the idea of psychically preserving your like intention energy or whatever, just random shit like that. Like there was a time when I stopped like eating cow and pig, and that did funny things, and it was all good, you know. Like I'm basically just trying to figure out ways to do less harm to myself and others, you know.
Self-care, yeah friggin' self-care.
Yeah also like I think porn is bad. You know, I think that's like not good.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna like shame you for looking at porn. I'm more like gonna say like, dude, it's like smoking cigarettes. You know, like we all know cigarettes are bad. Like,
yeah, I think maybe to simplify everything, it's all well. What is the value? What is the value of having something secret or something's hidden or or having some things feel like they're scarce? And so like with pornography, it makes like all these things definitely not very scarce. Like you want to do anything, like with you have a fantasy, there it is. You're, you know, pseudo living out that fantasy. But like is all that experience online taking away from your potential, experience with another person, which, maybe you're not. Maybe it's possible you shouldn't do certain hedonistic things with another person, but again, like, I don't know, we're humans. Like, maybe a sexual expression for levels of fun, I think that might be kind of a godly, trait or nature, just expressing that sexuality, but
interesting. I'm
Go
sorry.
ahead.
Go. I don't mean to interrupt you. You were actually saying
no, it's all good.
something.
Yeah, like when that comes to pornography, like, yeah, I guess I have different philosophical opinions because, like, I don't think there's always, black and white. Well, I will try to take a black and white stance on one thing. I think industrialized porn kind of really defeats everything. Like, I think you want something, at least something holy about sexuality, if you have those, people doing porn and they're actually kind of anonymous and it's like these weird couples from other countries, yeah, I have a hard time taking some sort of moral stance on that. You know what I mean? Because, to more or less degrees, those do exist, but there's also something to be said. Well, what is the benefit of having a shared private experience between two people and not sharing it with a portal or anyone else? Maybe that's where the real magic is happening. Just one person, one other person. Just like.
Okay, so here's what I'll ask you about, like, just regarding sexuality. Okay, so let's go back to this assuming the truth of how everyone is essentially the same soul living different lifetimes in different bodies, right? Like, that's because, like, if I ask you, like, where is Kurt? I can't find Kurt. I see a face, but is that what Kurt is? I see a body. Is that all you are? Is your body? Is that I know your name. Are you your name? I know you have thoughts. Are you your thoughts? I don't think so, because thoughts can't create thoughts. Are you your emotions? No, I don't think emotions could create emotions either. So where are you, man? Like, where is Kurt? Where is Kurt? No form, no name, somewhere in there. I can't see it, but it's there. So it's like, once you get to that, like, if you look at other people in terms of sexuality, like, essentially, like, especially for the people who want to have kids, for example, like, if you view people as, just another different version of you, why would you, if you're going to have kids with them, you're essentially just trying to make another version of you, right? So that being said, right, I do think that there is value to romance, but I do think in order for romance to properly occur, you have to go through a phase of forgetting your real self. You have to fractalize further from, like,
oh yeah,
from, like, your enlightened, unified mind. You have to, like, sink back further into your grosser state so that you could experience something as beautiful and enlightening ultimately as romance, which is ultimately pain. So it's like, it's funny because
definitely a painful aspect.
There's a cosmic irony to it, right? Like, you'll never find what you're looking for in another until you can find it within yourself first. And once you do find it within yourself first, you won't really need it in another. And the reason why, like, you constantly go through cycles of getting together, breaking up, getting together, breaking up, is because you're looking for something that's ephemeral. You're looking for something that's only consistent and forever if it's within yourself. So it's like, it's a weird dynamic. And I'm not saying I know all the answers or how to, like, approach this in a perfectly balanced way. No, I think the chaos is part of the beauty of romance, right? Like, it's part of the whole, like, life process, like, of fractalizing further and forgetting your true self and your true source self,
Yeah. And so what you're saying, it was totally, like, aligning with something I was writing, because, like, I think true romantic love, I think it can be something, that totally encapsulates a person. And I don't think it happens to everyone. Like, sometimes we have this process of, like, we have the propaganda of something like the American dream and the, nuclear family. And that's what's used, to propagate the species. And there's not all of that has to be bad. I'm not necessarily saying, the American dream was just a lie. It's not that way. It just was what it was. But how much was romantic love involved with that? And so I think if you actually look at the people that fall very deeply in love with each other, I think often that is a very, very good thing. But it's almost like for temporary portions of their life, of their lives, it's like the force is like sucked out of their body and they don't know what's happening, you know?
Well, okay, so let's define an overlooked process of, say, reincarnation or human incarnation of the souls, right? Because like we go from the souls and then we fractalize like beams of light from the one big ball of light. There's beams of light that shoot out into different bodies and different paths that live their own illusions and their own opinions and biases, their own lives. So assuming that, right? What was I going to say? Okay, so one overlooked process is the family lines. So if you look at it karmically, right? No matter who you born as, no matter what you're born with, you're going to be born in a family line with its own problems, its own curses, its own shit. So objectively speaking, on a technical basis, you could view family lines as like highways for your soul, like spirit, like soul highways, you know, for incarnation. You know, a family line is technically how humans have to incarnate, so they have to go down those highways. And then once you're born, you're going to see like problems within your transit line, like, oh shit, we have a bipolar disorder running through this line, or we have so you're either going to end the family line with you and close it off as best as you can, or you're going to heal it and fix it and repair it so that the transit line for incarnation could, you know, flow smoother. So I think, like, you know, no matter who you're born as, a part of your karmic assignment, you know, your incarnation assignment, your birth assignment is to like fix your family curses. You know, they either die with you or you heal them. You know, like you got to fix that shit. Otherwise they'll just keep repeating, right? Like it's logical to me. I can't think of a more logical way to put it.
Defeat those generational demons. Yeah.
And I think, like, you know, this goes back to like alignment, and I think like to beat those family curses is if you teach that. I can't remember anyone in my family teaching their kid, you know, like what it means to be aligned in mind, body, and soul. Everyone just taught me study really hard, get a good job, make a lot of money, don't do wrong, don't do this, make sure you do this, make sure you do this. No one told me. It's like, hey buddy, you should make sure your mind, body, and soul are not at war with each other. Like, what the fuck? Like if someone taught me that since I was like 6 years old, which that could easily be taught, you know, as easy as we're talking about it now. If someone taught me that since I was 6, I could have been like a super soldier by now or something, like a superhuman, you know, like what the fuck?
No, it was like Christianity was a huge force in this propagation of the American dream, but like that version of Christianity like was actually incredibly nihilistic in many ways because, well, it was nihilistic, it was very, very materialist, and I think it was very, you know, it was anti message of Christ, you know, because it was like, like the prosperity gospel is just, it should be obvious, you know, how many problems there are with that, but that's the thing that kind of overtook it. But like that is a very nihilistic approach to human life. It's like, okay, here's the formula. It's like, well, does God have a formula? If you're supposed to be Christ-like, if you're supposed to be like God, like
but I think what we're talking about on the grand spiritual scale, it transcends formula. This is basics. I'm agreeing with you. I'm agreeing with you.
Yeah,
if ET were looking down at us, they'd be like, "Are you kidding me? You don't know about mind, body, soul alignment? This is what we've done like 6 millennia ago as an advanced interdimensional species. Like you guys should have learned. Like the minute you would like, it's like a slippery slope from consciousness. Like once a species becomes conscious, quote unquote, like fully conscious on a metaphysical, physical, and a mental level, then that's when they start unlocking these things, right? I mean, it's not even like we're discovering anything new. Honestly, like when it comes across like discovering and like spiritual entities like spirits and demons, it's not like we need to unlock a technology to start seeing them. It's like, no, you just got to shift your perspective. Like you got to understand, like for example, we talked about earlier pattern recognition. Well, if you start treating patterns as real, like as in like entities, conscious entities, living things that may not have a physical form, but that may have a super form, you know, that transcends us. Maybe we're mere shadows to it. We are the shadows for the patterns, and the patterns exist on a higher dimension, you know, like, and maybe we have a certain degree of control because like we are connected with that source. And it's just it's pretty crazy. You know, like I do start looking at patterns in a very different light, and changed my life. It changed my physical, tangible life. Like I started changing the way I started doing things. I changed the way I perceive other people. I changed the way I treat myself. And this is why I think these things are very important, you know?
You ever your cat just like look at you like she loves you? That's what.
Fuck yeah.
Yeah.
Fuck yeah. No, cats are sacred. All right, so we could talk about cats. I did read this one cool myth that like dragons did exist on our plane of reality. However, they escaped. Like there was a period in our Earth when it started becoming very hostile and very like non-receptive towards spiritual entities. Apparently back there was a time in Earth's meta history, like I guess you'd say like history before history, that Earth was able to facilitate the existence or the manifestation and the expression of spiritual entities, like people with blue skin, for example, because their frequency just matched the spectrum that you'd be able to perceive them as we would perceive the blue sky. And back in that Earth, there were dragons. And once Earth, for some reason, was changing its frequency because of some magnetic shifts, because this is all determined by like cosmic forces, like cosmic relative positions of your of the whole. How the concept of ley lines, like expand that out towards like the universe or a galactic scale even. So it's like something shifted in our position in the galactic ley line network, and it made it inhospitable for spiritual and mystical entities. So dragons had to escape into cats. Like dragons started disappearing when house cats started appearing. So apparently the spirit of dragons escaped into house cats. And that's why house cats are such mystical and magically bound creatures.
Okay. I fully agree. This show, it's okay. We can just say on the show, yeah, cats are freaking magical, man.
Yeah.
Like they're incredibly psychic in a very particular way. It's so weird. Like sometimes if you just observe what your cat does, it's amazing. But like my cat is indoor outdoor. Some people hate on that. I think they're all just a bunch of wimps. Like I think if you live in a small town, like my cat only sticks to the property, so it's like it's justified. It's like she likes to survey the property. It's like if something's wrong, like if something's like wrong around the property, I feel like I would know because like my cat would observe that something was going on. It's weird what if you actually observe them observing. It seems like they are a different type of territorial than dogs are, because dogs would just be loud mouth about like
they're spiritually territorial.
Yes, exactly. So
and they're territorial on time.
Yeah, I think all of those things, yes. And so like I think they are good at keeping bad things in general away from a property. I think because they are loyal in a different way that dogs are loyal. I think if they appreciate their lives, they definitely want that good energy to transfer over your living vicinity. And so that's why I think that's simply put, like if you put a cat in a new environment, they want to get into every nook and cranny over their new territory.
You're clearing out the spiritual energy.
Yes, that, and they want to make sure everything's safe and secure. They go for inspections. That's what cats do. They just inspect the area, and so it's almost like having a security guard that can't shoot anybody. To be fair, but they can find a way of letting you know what's up. Like it's weird.
And people think like when cats are like chasing shit, like just randomly nothing, they could be chasing something that we just do not have the eyeballs to literally be able to see. These things could exist on a light frequency that we just cannot perceive.
Yes. Sorry, I'm just I'm reading some of the comments. One of them got me, but I don't want to read it. It would throw us off, I promise.
All right. No, I got you. But I mean, yeah. So cats as mystical, sacred beings. I totally agree with that. I totally think like a lot of harm befalls you when you start harming cats. It's kind of like a spiritual threshold. It's like harming children, kind of. It like damns you in a weird way.
Oh yeah, like cats probably really are good at keeping that karmic energy. They're like, oh yeah, we're gonna save that one, bitch.
Okay.
Wait till I get all my cat friends on this.
So I think it's time to get a little dark. Dun dun dun. Cue the dark music. All right. So right now we're getting very positive. We're discussing like positivity and whatever, and how powerful it can be for your daily life. But let's think about the other ends. I mean, think about who actually like runs the world, runs our culture, runs our media. I mean, these aren't people who are driven by positive frequencies. They're driven by negative frequencies. And what this should tell you is that there are tangible and material benefits to adopting, say, like Satanism or like evil occult worship, or like, you know, like something's built on manipulation and control. They absolutely have tangible, you know, elements that can make you feel more secure. But it's probably not going to lead to anywhere good, but it makes sense why, like, first of all, here's my theory. Like, I think like angels and like higher dimensional beings or whatever, like they don't care. Like they could phase in and out of our reality, in and out of space and time. Like they know how to time travel just as much as we know how to time travel. Like if we can make contact with our past and future selves by like writing our future self a letter or forgiving our past self for like past mistakes, that is us time traveling in a very, 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 very fundamental way. Like if you're asking one of your future selves for advice on how to become them, or like better, like how to like adopt their frequency, they will teach you, because that's you. They have an incentive to. And if you do that for your past self, and as time goes on, that bond gets stronger. We could do that because we have the divine spark. I think demons do not have that divine spark. So this is why they attack bloodlines. This is why they control bloodlines. Because if you control the bloodlines, you don't have to travel through time, because you travel through time through blood. And this is why a lot of those satanic rituals are sexual, because they have to possess you through breeding and like through like controlling like satanic bloodlines. And like, you know, like they'll hijack like originally holy bloodlines. Like if you're generationally related to King Solomon or something, they'll use you for some satanic breeding purposes or whatever, you know, like stuff like really dark shit. And this also extends to, I don't know, people in our media, like people who run our media. Like there clearly is a pattern of satanic ritual worship where they do some very dark things that you don't want to say on a live stream, but they do these things.
Oh.
And you see this in like, you see this in Hollywood, you see this in the music industry, you see this in the military, you see this in government, you see this in every element of culture on the highest levels, because they all can like corporatism, you know, like you see this, like they do these things, and it does give them power. Now, is the demon real? Is Satan real? I don't know, but what I do know is that these patterns that they subscribe to give them this element of control that could enforce their fear, their negative frequencies onto the masses in a very, very tangible way, like through movies, through music, through television, through cultural initiatives and campaigns. Like this is real shit, isn't it?
One note I took out of that, like we're not going to talk politics.
No, we're not even talking. I'm just talking about like.
No, I mean me. This could be misconstrued, but I turned on ABC, or at least I watched a video on ABC of them presenting the debates. And one thing I can't get over is like, I don't know, like you expect like news presenters to obviously look professional to some degree, whatever that looks like. But it's like everything has gotten so fake and superficial, artificial. It's like every news presenter, well, now the vice president, it's like he's had plastic surgery. It's like, but it's obvious. And it's like, in my opinion, it's like all these plastic surgeries, they're starting to make people what age. It seems like it makes them look very similar to each other, but it all looks ugly. All these like, you know, lip injections and shit. Like I think
it's like the mark of the beast kind of.
Yeah,
it's an aesthetic. It's not just like a tattoo. It's an aesthetic. It's a vibe. It's a vibe.
I have no problem. Like I think, you know, there's a long history of, you know, well, women and men to a degree, you know, dolling up their appearance a little bit, you know, to try to sexually market themselves. But I think this is like, it's a whole new level of perversion. What we have.
I just want to say this, like they believe it's real, so it has power. From RGZ Mac, and I totally agree with that, which is, you know, like what I'm saying, like if
they look like lizard people.
If we know demons and lizard people aren't real, but a person out there believed in them and their agenda enough so where it actually affected their actions and their initiatives and their motivations, you might as well treat them as real, because for all, you know, as far as we're concerned, they're real, right? You know, because it's affecting our reality. Their existence as a concept is just making people behave in a certain way, so that makes demons real, that makes angels real. Like once you start making deals with these entities, you start making them more real, and people just freely do this shit, you know, like for fun, I guess, or for a lot of like selfish reasons, or a lot of times because they have no choice. You know, you'll have people in like the worst, darkest moments of their lives, and they have no one to turn to but God. And that's like an example of like adopting like I guess a higher pattern, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, you literally shed blood to get this plastic surgery, so I guess it is kind of a blood cold, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's freaking wild to think about. Now I don't want to spend. I know we're getting closer to the end, so I won't like go off.
Yeah,
on...
we got. Yeah. No, go off, man. We got to burn. We got to burn through it.
Okay. Yeah. So like again, I spend some time. Well, I mentioned atomization earlier, and I mentioned most of what we need to do about it. So yeah, but yeah, I do think we could drift back into a less atomized society and be stronger for it as a people. And I think that needs to happen on a somewhat global scale. It's not that we need to see the value of different cultures. This isn't pluralism. I'm saying like literally the spirits that exist, I think they change from area to area. You have a different alignment with whatever natural environment that you're in, and that's going to change depending on where you are. If you live in the desert, obviously your interpretation of God over time as a people is going to evolve differently, and that doesn't make you wrong. It just means you're seeing a different fractal of God on this earth. And so like I think that's why you can't rely on globalism, because it's just not going to work. Yeah, we could definitely be in a less atomized society, and I think we could start doing little things to reduce this economic arms race against other people. And I think the benefits are starting to really seem like they outweigh the negatives.
Well, I think of it like this. Like, let's say, because I, to my core, believe that everyone is truly the same soul living out different lifetimes in different bodies. Like the saint, the nun. Yeah, it's just a different version of me. The rapist, murderer, say different version of me. The dictator, different version of me. The president of the United States, different version of me. The pop star, different version of me. All these different people, no matter how good or evil they are, they're ultimately, we're just the same soul living out different incarnations of the same soul. So if I maintain that, right? That being said, now imagine everyone in the world believed in that same thing. Now, well, that would mean everyone in the world would have the ability to make themselves happy or sad at will using just their thoughts. Now, what do you think that world would look like?
Spicy for sure. But no, like, I don't know. So I'm not going to spend an hour talking about psychedelics, but because we don't have an hour. But now, like a few of those like experiences, I think it opens up the limitations of language for sure. Like you know that there are limitations in language; they can't express everything. But it's like there are areas of my life where I felt like they were so repressed that the only way to make them manifest was that type of experience. And so like then it's like we have a society that almost does want to repress sadness, and will repress the therapeutic value of just feeling sad and feeling bad for a while. There's nothing wrong. Like the only way I could physically come to tears and do something for a while was on that experience. And that happened like every time for a long time. And then eventually it just got better because I think I got better at just like integrating. And so like if we had, I think that would be like a superpower in today's world, because now we have a society that's just lost in repression. I think, a society in which we're masters, and we see the value of like, it's okay to feel sad because, if we can come out on the other end, we can feel it. Every time you get sad, the flavor of happiness on the other end becomes a little bit different. It becomes a little bit more seasoned, and that's okay. That's just part of the cycle of life, and that's just all right. It's just all right. Yeah, when not to be too tangential, like I wrote a little bit this passage about romantic love.
Go for it, man. It's all you. Take the stage.
If it finds you, the opposite of what they say is also true. When you find love, you know it, but when you find love, you will not know it, because the thing that is out there, it can't be mimicked by our media system. It's something that's elusive. It's something that is divine, and so it doesn't want to be captured by that simple pattern recognition system. Perhaps it was only ever meant for a few to be selected to know its power. Love does not like to be controlled. So what is it really like? It might be too powerful in its raw form. It's the blinding light of God just hitting us. We don't want to disintegrate, but we can get a flavor of it, I guess, like you were saying. You can see that love also confuses and sucks the light out of life out of those it selects to a degree, but it's also a driving force of life. It's a driving force of our sense of passion, and we need a world that can appreciate a sense of passion. If even only a few people can experience this type of passionate love, it might be enough for everyone to keep believing in it, even if not everyone is selected to experience this awesome experience. So yeah, it's really just out there. Yeah, it's out there, but it's awesome, and it can be worth it.
Are you talking about defractalizing yourself for the sake of love?
Yes, there you go, man. There you go. Hold on, let me see. Let's see. We're gonna share screen here. We're gonna share screen.
Oh,
no,
wait,
that's. Hold on.
Okay.
All right.
Send me the link. Send me the link and I'll share it. Brother, man.
Hold on. You need to tell me if I'll share this for a few seconds. You can tell me if you can hear it clearly or not. Is that clear music?
No, it's only what I'm hearing through the microphone.
Only what you're hearing through the Oh, that's why. Because there's a function that says audio too. That's why.
Yes, sir. Unfortunately, I've just gained access to like Andreas's whole battle station here. So like I'm just learning how to do like, neat little things like going through the songs like or like there's some good ones in here. I was going through it before, but like yeah, it's funny. He's like he's using basically like necromancy to make music. Like he's conjuring the spirits of the dead to make this art.
Okay, I got this figured out. All right, so now you can tell me if this is clear audio or not. 1 second.
Yeah, that is clear audio. Let's get it.
Okay, this is what I'm working on. Copyright free.
Nice. Thank you. Let's Bring It for gifting Andreas Xirtus 5 memberships. It sounds very discordant, man.
Yeah.
We should start a band, honestly. We should teach Andreas how to sing on a mic, and we should start a band. I'll play rhythm or I'll play bass. I'll play the bass. If there's definitely gonna be better guitarists than me, but I could play bass.
That actually was my first instrument. If I had to pick an instrument of where I'm just like I would have to say I'm pretty good at it. Yeah. Guitar was my first instrument. So I started when I was 18. Now I'm 34. I have some years under my belt on that.
Yeah, I'm similar. Like I started playing music when I was technically I started piano lessons when I was like 6. Didn't take it seriously. Quit right away. Then I took clarinet lessons in 1st grade. Didn't take it seriously. quit. And then when I was 14, I started going to punk shows, and then I started playing guitar, and not like, you know, formal lessons, but like going to studios with my friends, and like we would just cut school and go there and drink and smoke weed, and just they would hand me a guitar. And it's like, yeah, I'll teach you how to play power chords. And I eventually learned how to play power chords, and I eventually learned how to play lead parts. And after that, it was just like, it was cool, you know, like I liked like jamming with my friends and playing an ensemble, which is also really weird. You know, like once I expanded out of my like area, I realized there were a lot of like musicians that could play music but couldn't jam, and I was like, what the fuck? And but then I also I became like an adult, and I discovered raving, and I really got into like producing electronic music like really heavily, and I got pretty good at it. I still am pretty good at it. Like I still make stuff. Like I'll link my music channel, but I mean, once I started getting into contact with DJs, like I realized a lot of them couldn't play instruments or jam at all. You know, I'll be like, oh, that sucks. But then, you know, it's like on the other end, it's like I would go to my old peeps who I used to jam with, and I'd be like, they wouldn't know anything about like actually putting a track together, you know, in terms of like production and like sound engineering and stuff like that and mixing. And I'm like, oh, okay. So that put me in a weird place with music. And I didn't, you know, I used to think it was like a weird, annoying place, but now I realize it's a good place. You know, it's a good place to be.
For sure. All right. What, like 5 minutes left?
Yeah. So you got time for a closing statements, man. Take it away.
Okay. All right. I'll do 3 minutes here. Okay. We're gonna do an entire screen again for like a minute. All right. Here we go. This is part of my closing statement. So I'll let this play while I describe the concept for my next album. If you like experimental electronic music, go check out American Time Machine. It's on Spotify. I really recommend going to the last album. The last album is the screen behind me. That's the cover. And there's a lot of new concepts here. So this song, yeah, it's hard to put it on a box, but this is like the soothing relief of that plays a lot more with different levels of loudness, because electronic music is used to being really, really loud all the time, but this is designed to like alternate a little bit more. But the concept for that I'm working on now, it'll be a series of 3 albums. You can't really see that, but I think it'll take me around a year to complete, but essentially it'll be about time travel a little bit in the connectivity between all things. So there's going to be a first album, a middle album, and a last album, and themes from the first album are going to trade places on the final album, and essentially you're going to get kind of maybe a time traveling effect because the ideas are pulled from one end to the other. It's a really big project. It's my most ambitious that I've done so far, but I think it'll be really awesome. But hopefully, if you want study music or something that's not really lyrical and really experimental, I think you would really dig this. A lot of the stuff to put on in the background. That being said, there's a lot. As far as like music and relate, like I hope you're okay. It's not just important to be self-promoting. I just think, you know, hopefully it's not just me, an expression of myself. I hope it's an expression of the beauty of all things. Yada yada yada. Hope you're all doing well, and hope Chris is doing well. It was honestly really nice to just have a couple people. It's like,
I told you, man. I told you I'm good at this. I just need one person and I could make it fucking work. So let this be, Andreas, if you're listening, I just need one person, man. Just one person, and I got this. Like, because I know, I know how to bring it out of people. Because I'm just interested in people's frequencies and their patterns, and like that's really what I look at. Like, I don't have to look at your race or your orientation or your gender. Like, everyone's got that frequency, and that's what you gotta like really their essence. Anyway, oh yeah, my closing statement, by the way, I just want to say to anyone listening, align yourself in mind, body, and soul. Don't worry about right and wrong. Don't worry about better or worse. Just make it so your mind, your body, and your soul are not at war with each other. And with that, we say peace and good night. Good night. Thanks for watching.
This must be me.